The streetlights along Jefferson Avenue had just flickered on when Captain Marcus Hill turned off the highway and into downtown Raleigh. It had been a long week. Logistics briefings, equipment audits, a late-night training rotation that refused to end on schedule. He loosened his grip on the steering wheel as he drove, letting the quiet hum of his sedan fill the silence. He wasn't in uniform tonight, just dark jeans, a fitted charcoal jacket, and a plain black t-shirt. His military ID rested in his wallet in the center console. His service record 2 overseas deployments, commendation medals, leadership citations was invisible in the reflection of his windshield. A sudden flash of red and blue lights filled his rearview mirror. Marcus checked his speed automatically, 34 and a 35. He exhaled slowly and signaled, pulling to the curb with calm precision. He lowered his window before the officer even reached the door. Officer Daniel Mercer stepped out of the cruiser with deliberate authority. Young, clean-cut, one hand resting near his belt. His patrol camera blinked red. "License and registration," Mercer said, not greeting him. "Of course," Marcus replied evenly. He moved slowly, carefully, narrating his movements the way years of training had taught him. "My wallet's in my back pocket." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus froze briefly, then adjusted, lifting both hands to the steering wheel. "I'm reaching for my wallet now." Mercer didn't answer. He stepped closer to the window, leaning down slightly to get a better look inside the car. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus blinked once. "May I ask why, officer?" "I said step out." The shift in tone was subtle but unmistakable. Marcus complied. He opened the door slowly and stepped onto the pavement. The evening air felt cooler than before. "What seems to be the issue?" Marcus asked calmly. "Your taillights cracked," Mercer replied, "and you were swerving." "I wasn't aware of that," Marcus said. "I can have it fixed." Mercer studied him with narrowed eyes. "Where you headed?" "Home." "From where?" "Work." "And where's that?" Marcus held his gaze. Fort Bronson. A flicker of something crossed Mercer's face. "You military?" "Yes." Mercer's lips pressed thin. "You don't look like you just got off base." Marcus didn't respond. "Hands behind your back." The words came suddenly. "For what reason?" Marcus asked, still composed. Mercer stepped forward aggressively. "Stop resisting!" "I'm not resisting." The slap came without warning. A sharp crack split the air as Mercer's palm struck Marcus across the face. It wasn't hard enough to knock him down, but it was loud enough to turn heads from across the street. A couple walking, their dog stopped. Someone across the road raised a phone. Marcus didn't move, didn't raise his voice. But something shifted in his eyes. Mercer stepped closer. "You think you're better than me?" Backup sirens echoed faintly in the distance. And just like that, what should have been a routine traffic stop became something else entirely. The slap hung in the air like a gunshot. For a moment, Captain Marcus Hill didn't even react, not the way most people would. His head turned slightly with the impact, then returned to center. His jaw tightened, but he didn't raise his hands, didn't step forward, didn't do anything that could be twisted into aggression. That restraint wasn't weakness, it was training. Officer Daniel Mercer, however, looked almost disappointed. He took a half-step closer, chest puffed out, like he wanted Marcus to flinch, to swing, to give him a reason. When Marcus didn't, Mercer's eyes hardened. "You're refusing a lawful order," Mercer snapped. "I'm asking for clarification." Marcus replied, voice steady. "You struck me. I haven't threatened you. I haven't touched you." Mercer scoffed like the words were a joke. "You people always got something to say." Marcus felt the temperature drop in his stomach. Not fear recognition. That sentence wasn't about law enforcement. It wasn't about safety. It was personal. Mercer reached for Marcus's wrist. Marcus immediately shifted his hands outward, palms open. "Officer, I'm not resisting. I will comply. But I need you to calm down." The moment Marcus said calm down, Mercer's face twisted. "Don't tell me to calm down." Then Mercer yanked Marcus forward hard enough that his shoulder jerked. Marcus stumbled one step, not from loss of balance, but because Mercer pulled him off center. The move was subtle, almost professional, like Mercer knew exactly how to create a moment that could later be described as lunging. See? Mercer barked loudly, for the street to hear. He's trying to fight. Marcus regained his footing instantly. That's not what happened. Mercer shoved him against the side of the car. Metal groaned. Marcus's cheek pressed against the cold paint. A woman across the street gasped. Marcus caught it in his peripheral vision. 2 phones raised now. One from a teenager outside a corner store. Another from a man leaning against a parked truck. Mercer didn't seem to care. In fact, he looked energized by the attention. Put your hands behind your back, Mercer said again, louder. Marcus complied immediately. Mercer snapped one cuff on, too tight, purposefully. Marcus inhaled sharply as the steel bit into his wrist. That's too tight, Marcus said through clenched teeth. Mercer leaned in close enough that Marcus could smell the coffee on his breath. You're lucky I don't do worse. Then Mercer shoved his second arm behind his back and forced the other cuff on with a brutal twist. Pain shot up Marcus's shoulder. Marcus let out a short grunt, but even that was controlled. Mercer raised his voice again. He's resisting! Stop! The man with the phone yelled. He's not doing anything. Mercer whipped his head toward the man. Back up. The man didn't move. Mercer stared him down, then turned back to Marcus, tightening the cuffs again like punishment. A second police cruiser pulled up with tires screeching, then a third. The street filled with flashing lights, and suddenly the situation looked like a violent suspect had been caught, not a traffic stop gone wrong. 2 backup officers approached fast. One was older, heavier. The other looked young, nervous. What's going on? The older one asked. Mercer didn't hesitate. He assaulted me, Mercer said instantly. Tried to grab my weapon, then resisted arrest. Marcus's heart sank not because he was scared of Mercer, but because he understood the system. He understood what words like assault and weapon did. They didn't just describe a crime. They created permission. Marcus turned his head slightly, voice still calm. That is not true. I never touched him. Mercer stepped forward and pointed at Marcus's face. Book him. The older officer looked at Marcus, really looked. Then he looked at Mercer. Sir, Marcus said, speaking to the older officer now, my name is Marcus Hill. I'm a captain in the United States Army. My military ID is in my wallet. I'm requesting a supervisor. Mercer laughed. Yeah? And I'm the president. Then he shoved Marcus toward the cruiser, and as Marcus was forced into the back seat, the final insult landed. Mercer leaned down and said quietly, so only Marcus could hear, Let's see how tough you are in court. The door slammed, and the lies had officially begun. The holding cell smelled like disinfectant and old metal. Marcus sat upright on the narrow bench, hands resting on his knees, replaying the last 20 minutes in his head. Every movement, every word, every shift in tone. He knew discipline. He knew command. And he knew when something had been calculated. Officer Daniel Mercer hadn't lost control. He had escalated on purpose. Across the station, Mercer sat at a desktop terminal, typing. His posture was relaxed now, confident. The adrenaline from the street had faded, replaced by something colder control. Lieutenant Carla Nguyen stepped into the report room, holding a folder under her arm. Daniel, she said evenly. Walk me through it. Mercer didn't turn around. Routine stop, cracked tail light. Guy gets defensive, refuses commands, reaches toward his waistband. Nguyen's eyes narrowed slightly. Did you see a weapon? No. But he moved like he had one. That's not what I asked. Mercer finally turned, leaning back in his chair. He was aggressive, tried to grab my arm. I took him down. He resisted. Nguyen studied him carefully. And your body cam. Mercer clicked his tongue once. Battery died right when things got physical. Convenient timing. It's old equipment, Lieutenant. You know that. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stepped closer to the monitor and read what he had typed. Suspect displayed combative behavior. Attempted to reach for officer's duty belt. Physical force applied in response to perceived threat. Nguyen exhaled slowly. You're charging him with assault on an officer? Yes, ma'am. And resisting? Yes, ma'am. Nguyen glanced toward the hallway that led to booking. Who is he? Mercer shrugged. Some guy claiming he's military. Claiming? He flashed something before we cuffed him. Nguyen held his gaze for a long second. Daniel, If he's active duty, this is going to escalate. He assaulted me, Mercer replied flatly. Rank doesn't change that. Nguyen tapped the desk lightly with her knuckles, thinking. The department had already taken heat last quarter over an excessive force complaint. The chief had made it clear, minimize headlines, protect the badge. You sure about this report? She asked quietly. Mercer didn't hesitate. Yes, ma'am. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Nguyen nodded once. Submit it. Mercer turned back to the keyboard and hit save. Across the building, Marcus stood at booking while an officer inventoried his belongings. Wallet, watch, phone. The booking officer paused when he pulled out the military ID. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Your army? Yes. The officer glanced down the hallway, then back at Marcus. Captain? Yes. The officer hesitated, then placed the ID back on the tray. Why'd you swing on Mercer? I didn't. The booking officer didn't respond. Instead, he pushed the tray forward. Sign here. Marcus signed, a loud printer whirred nearby. His mugshot was taken under harsh fluorescent light. He stood straight, face neutral. No anger, no fear, just control. As he was led back to the holding area, he heard Mercer's voice echo faintly from the report room. Clear threat to officer safety. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. In the army, integrity was currency. You either had it, or you were removed. In this building, it seemed, narrative was currency, and Mercer had just printed his version in black and white. By 0700 the next morning, Captain Marcus Hill's arrest was no longer contained inside a police station. It had crossed into federal territory. The call reached Fort Branson's command office before Marcus had even made his first phone call. Civilian law enforcement was required to notify base command when an active duty officer was arrested, especially on charges involving violence. Colonel David Reynolds read the report twice. Assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, suspected attempt to disarm. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. Marcus Hill wasn't some reckless junior officer. He was disciplined, measured, and trusted with sensitive logistics operations overseas. He didn't attempt to grab weapons. Get me Sergeant Brooks, Reynolds said. Across town, Marcus finally sat across from a public defender in a small consultation room. His wrists were still red from the cuffs. You're looking at serious charges, the defender said quietly. Assault on an officer carries weight. I never touched him, Marcus replied. The defender nodded slowly. Then we're going to need evidence. Marcus thought about the bystanders, the phones, the witnesses. I believe there were recordings. We'll request them, the defender said. But understand something, the police narrative carries influence. Marcus understood. By noon, Fort Branson's Legal Affairs Division had opened a parallel review. Not because they believed Marcus was guilty, but because military officers were held to a higher public standard. Sergeant Aaron Brooks knocked once and stepped into Colonel Reynolds' office. You asked for me, sir. Reynolds handed him a printed copy of the police report. Brooks read it silently. This doesn't sound like him, Brooks said firmly. It doesn't, Reynolds agreed, but perception matters. What are we doing? For now? Administrative review. No suspension yet. But if this escalates publicly, we'll have to consider temporary relief from duty. Brooks's jaw tightened. That would damage his career. Yes, Reynolds said quietly. It would. By mid-afternoon, a local news site ran the headline. Army captain charged after violent traffic stop. The article quoted Officer Daniel Mercer's statement, word for word. Suspect became combative and reached toward officer's weapon. The story spread quickly. On base, whispers followed. In the civilian world, comments exploded online. Another entitled officer thinking he's above the law. Why would a cop lie? Let's see the footage. Marcus sat alone in his apartment that evening, finally released on bail. His phone buzzed non-stop. Texts from colleagues, calls from unknown numbers, notifications from news alerts. He set the phone face down. For years, he had worn a uniform that represented discipline, honor, and service. Now his name was tied to violence. And in the absence of evidence, the loudest voice was the police report. The military investigation was procedural, but procedural damage was still damage. A formal email arrived at 1842. Pending resolution of civilian charges, you are restricted from field command duties. Not a suspension, but not normal duty either. Marcus read it twice. He wasn't angry. He wasn't panicked. But for the first time since the traffic stop, something heavier than bruised pride settled in his chest. This wasn't about a slap anymore. It was about reputation. And reputation, once stained, didn't wash clean easily. Across town, Officer Daniel Mercer scrolled through the same headlines with a faint smirk. His version of events had gone public first. And in battles like this, first impressions were often the hardest to erase. The courtroom was smaller than Marcus expected. Municipal courtrooms weren't built for drama, just efficiency. Fluorescent lights, wooden benches, a seal of the state mounted above the bench. Routine cases move quickly here, but when Marcus Hill stepped inside in a navy suit and restrained posture, heads turned. Officer Daniel Mercer sat at the prosecution table in uniform, polished badge, pressed fabric. Clean narrative. Assistant District Attorney Thomas Keene flipped through a thin folder, calm and composed. This was procedural for him. Just another charge sheet moving through the system. Marcus stood beside his temporary counsel. Case 2-2CR1187, the clerk announced. State versus Marcus Hill. Judge Eleanor Whitfield entered with quiet authority. No theatrics, no wasted motion. Be seated. Marcus remained standing as instructed. Keene rose first. Your Honor, the defendant is charged with assault on a law enforcement officer and resisting arrest during a lawful traffic stop. Officer Mercer reports that Miss Hill became combative, attempted to reach for his duty belt, and required physical restraint. Marcus kept his eyes forward. Keene continued, voice steady. Given the seriousness of assaulting an officer and the potential threat to public safety, the state requests a secured bond of $25,000. A murmur passed through the back row. Marcus's counsel stood. Your Honor, Captain Marcus Hill is an active-duty Army officer with 12 years of service, no prior criminal record, 2 overseas deployments. He voluntarily complied with arrest. We request a signature bond or, at minimum, a substantially reduced bail. Judge Whitfield studied Marcus. You are active duty? Yes, Your Honor. Have you ever been charged with any criminal offense before? No, ma'am. Whitfield nodded once, then turned to Keene. Does the state have video footage? Keene hesitated only slightly. Officer Mercer's body camera malfunctioned during the physical portion of the encounter. The judge's expression did not change. Dash cam? Also unavailable due to technical error. Silence. Filled the room for half a second too long. Whitfield made a note. Bond is set at $15,000, she said finally. Defendant is ordered to surrender passport, if applicable, and refrain from contact with the arresting officer. Preliminary hearing set for 30 days. The gavel tapped once. Next case. And just like that, Marcus was processed through the system like any other defendant. As he stepped away from the podium, Mercer's eyes met his. There was no anger in Mercer's expression. Just confidence. Outside the courthouse, a small cluster of reporters waited. Captain Hill, one shouted. Did you assault the officer? Marcus paused on the steps. His counsel leaned close. Don't engage. Marcus nodded and walked past the microphones without speaking. The headlines would fill in the silence themselves. Inside, ADA Keene gathered his folder calmly. Strong case? Lieutenant Nguyen asked quietly as she approached from the hallway. Assault on an officer always carries weight, Keene replied. Juries tend to believe uniforms. Nguyen didn't respond. Across the parking lot, Marcus stood alone for a moment before getting into his car. He had faced hostile terrain overseas. He had operated under pressure before. But this battlefield was different. This one wasn't about strength. It was about narrative. And right now, the courtroom believed Officer Daniel Mercer. The office of Rebecca Sloan wasn't flashy. No oversized law degrees covering the walls. No dramatic cityscape view. Just organized shelves, framed verdict summaries, and a quiet confidence that came from winning difficult cases. Marcus sat across from her desk, posture straight, despite the exhaustion behind his eyes. She didn't interrupt while he spoke. He walked her through everything. The stop, the slap, the cuffs, The language Mercer used, the bystanders recording. When he finished, Sloane folded her hands. "Start from the moment he told you to step out," she said calmly. "Exact wording." Marcus repeated it. She took notes quickly, efficiently. When he mentioned the body cam failure, she paused. Battery died at the exact moment force was used. That's what they claim. She leaned back in her chair. "That's not uncommon," she said flatly. "It's just rarely coincidental." Marcus studied her. "Do you believe me?" Sloane met his eyes without hesitation. "Yes." It wasn't emotional. It wasn't sympathetic. It was analytical. "I've handled enough excessive force cases to recognize patterns," she continued. "Escalation without cause. Narrative framing. Missing footage. The report uses language designed to justify force after the fact." She slid the printed police report across the desk. "Suspect displayed combative behavior. That phrase shows up in about 70% of these cases." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, not relief, but alignment. "Can you win this?" he asked. Sloane didn't smile. "Winning isn't the first objective. Controlling the narrative is." She reached for her phone and dialed her paralegal. Draft preservation letters to Raleigh PD. Full body cam logs, dash cam metadata, dispatch audio, radio transcripts, and maintenance records for Officer Mercer's equipment. Also subpoena surrounding businesses within a 2-block radius. She hung up. "First rule," she said to Marcus, "never rely on what they choose to give you. We request everything." Marcus nodded. "There were people recording," he added. "Good," Sloane replied. "We'll find them." She opened a new file folder labeled Hill v. Mercer. "Understand something, Captain. The state's attorney is going to lean on your military discipline. They'll argue you were trained in hand-to-hand combat. They'll suggest you posed a threat because of your background." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. "I never touched him." "I know, but perception matters, especially when jurors see a uniform on one side." She tapped her pen lightly against the folder. "Right now, Officer Mercer has the advantage. His report was first. The press picked it up. The department signed off on it." "What changes that?" Marcus asked. "Proof," Sloane said simply. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked back up at Marcus. "There's already chatter online about bystander footage." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Does that help?" "It can," Sloane replied, "if it shows the initial escalation." She stood and walked to the window briefly, thinking, if we can demonstrate that Mercer initiated physical contact without lawful cause, his entire narrative collapses. And if we can't? Sloane turned back toward him. Then we prepare for trial. She walked back to her desk and extended her hand. "Captain Hill, this isn't going to move quickly. The department will close ranks. The prosecution will resist discovery. But truth has one advantage." Marcus shook her hand. "What's that?" "It doesn't need embellishment." For the first time since the arrest, Marcus felt something steady under his feet again. Not certainty, but strategy. And strategy was something he understood well. Rebecca Sloane moved fast. By the next morning, preservation letters were already sent to the police department, the city's IT division, and the district attorney's office. She didn't trust anyone's technical malfunction story without seeing the maintenance logs, upload timestamps, and the chain of custody. Marcus sat in his apartment, staring at his phone like it might explode. His name was still trending locally, not in a heroic way, in a messy, half-informed way. Then, around 2:14 p.m., a new message hit his inbox. "Unknown number. I was there. I recorded it. I don't know what to do, but he was wrong." Marcus's heart rate spiked instantly. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he forwarded it to Sloane. Within 30 seconds, she called him. "Do not reply," she said. "Not yet." "It could be the footage," Marcus said. "It could also be someone trying to bait you," Sloane replied. "Let me handle it." She texted the number from her office phone, professional and direct. "Rebecca Sloane. This is attorney Rebecca Sloane. If you recorded the incident involving Captain Marcus Hill, we need to preserve the original file. Do not edit it. Do not upload it. Can you meet today?" 10 minutes passed. Then a response came. "Unknown number. Yes, I'm not trying to cause problems. I just don't want him to get away with it." Sloane replied with an address and a time. At 4:30 p.m., a young man walked into her office carrying a phone and a nervous expression. He looked about 21, college hoodie, shaky hands, the kind of person who'd never been inside a law office in his life. "My name's Ethan," he said quietly. I'm not trying to get involved, but I saw it." He hit him. Sloane didn't soften her tone. She didn't scare him either. She just spoke like someone who had done this before. "You did the right thing coming here," she said. "Now I need you to tell me everything, from the start." Ethan swallowed. "I was outside the corner store. I heard yelling. I looked over and saw the cop push him. Then he slapped him. I started recording because... I don't know. I just knew he'd lie." Marcus sat in the chair beside Sloane, silent, watching Ethan carefully. Ethan unlocked his phone and pulled up the video. The footage was shaky at first, but clear enough. It showed Mercer standing too close. It showed Marcus with his hands visible. It showed the slap loud, sharp, undeniable. Marcus's stomach tightened as he watched it. Sloane didn't react emotionally. She reacted like a surgeon. "Do you have the original file?" she asked. "Yes." "Did you upload it anywhere?" Ethan hesitated. "I posted a short clip on my story for like 10 minutes. Then my friend said I should delete it because cops can come after you." Sloane nodded once. "That's fine, but we need the full file, untouched. Metadata matters." She turned to her paralegal. "Clone his phone, extract the original file, preserve it, document everything." Ethan looked terrified. "Am I gonna get in trouble?" "No," Sloane said, "but you might get pressured, and that's why we're doing this the right way." Marcus finally spoke. "Thank you," he said quietly. Ethan's eyes flicked toward him. "I'm sorry, man. I didn't even know you were military until later. I just knew you weren't doing anything." Sloane closed the file on her desk. "This video is enough to shift the case," she said. Marcus looked at her. "But it's not enough to end it," she continued. He frowned. "Why not?" Sloane's voice lowered. "Because the slap is bad, but the charges are assault and resisting. We need the moment he claims you attacked him." Marcus stared at the frozen frame on Sloane's screen. The truth had surfaced, but the most important part was still missing. And somewhere out there, Sloane knew, the rest of the footage existed. They just had to dig it out before the system buried it. Officer Daniel Mercer didn't look worried. Not yet. He sat inside the precinct conference room with his union representative, a thick-necked man named Paul Dwyer, who had defended half the department at one point or another. "You followed protocol," Dwyer said calmly. "Stick to the report. Don't improvise." Mercer leaned back in his chair. "I didn't improvise." "You escalated," Dwyer replied, not accusing, just stating a fact. Now escalation has to look justified. Mercer's jaw tightened. He reached. "Did he?" There was a pause. He moved. Dwyer studied him carefully. "Daniel, listen to me. If there's footage out there, this becomes a different conversation." Mercer waved it off. "Bodycam died, dashcam glitched. Nothing clean enough to matter." "You're sure?" "Yes." Dwyer nodded once. "Then you hold your line." Across the building, Lieutenant Carla Wynne was staring at a copy of Ethan's video still frame that had already begun circulating in legal discovery channels. It hadn't hit mainstream media yet, but she knew it would. The still image was clear enough. Mercer's hand mid-swing, Marcus's hands visible, not clenched. Wynne felt the slow tightening pressure that came before a department scandal. She stepped into Captain Wallace's office. "We may have a problem," she said quietly. Wallace looked up from his desk. "How bad?" "There's civilian footage." Wallace leaned back slowly. "Does it contradict the report?" "Yes." "Is it complete?" "No. It cuts off before the alleged weapon reach." Wallace exhaled slowly. "Then we're still standing." Wynne hesitated. "For now." Wallace's voice lowered. "Carla, understand something. The chief has budget hearings in 6 weeks. We cannot have another excessive force headline." Wynne nodded. "Internal affairs?" she asked. "Not unless it blows up publicly," Wallace replied. "Right now, we manage this." "Manage it," the word echoed. Later that evening, Mercer's phone buzzed. A text from Lieutenant Wynne. "Report to my office, now." He walked in with casual confidence. Wynne closed the door behind him. "There's video," she said without preamble. Mercer shrugged. "People record everything. It shows you initiating contact." He was mouthing off. "That's not what the video shows." Mercer's expression hardened. "So what? They see 10 seconds. They don't see what happened after." Wynne held his stare. "You better hope so." Mercer folded his arms. "You're not backing me?" Wynne's voice stayed level. "I'm backing the department." "And I am the department." Wynne didn't blink. "No, you're an officer in it." Silence filled the room. "Listen carefully," she continued. "You do not deviate from your report. You do not discuss this outside official channels. You do not post anything. You do not respond online." Mercer scoffed slightly. "You think I'm stupid?" "I think you're overconfident," Wynne replied. He smirked faintly. "They can't prove assault without the body cam." Wynne didn't respond immediately. Because that was the exact mindset that destroyed careers. Across town, Rebecca Sloan was drafting a formal motion to compel full equipment diagnostics and maintenance records. She wasn't arguing emotion. She was building pressure. And pressure, she knew, always revealed cracks. Mercer walked out of the station that night, still believing he controlled the situation. He didn't know that narrative control was slipping. Not loudly, not publicly, but steadily. And once control left the hands of the first storyteller, it rarely returned. The pre-trial hearing didn't feel like a trial. There was no jury, no dramatic testimony, no closing arguments, just paperwork, procedure, and a judge deciding whether the case had enough weight to survive. But Marcus knew something most civilians didn't. Sometimes, this was where the war was decided. The courtroom was colder than the first appearance. Less crowded, fewer reporters. But the tension was sharper. Rebecca Sloan sat beside Marcus at the defense table, her posture calm, her folder thick. She wore a dark blazer, no jewelry, no softness in her expression. Across from them, ADA Thomas Keene stood with Officer Daniel Mercer seated behind him in uniform. Mercer's badge caught the light when he shifted, like a deliberate reminder of who the system was built to believe. Judge Eleanor Whitfield entered and took her seat. "Counsel," she said. "Let's proceed." Keene began. "Your Honor, the state maintains that the defendant assaulted Officer Mercer during a lawful traffic stop. The officer feared for his weapon and used necessary force. The defendant then resisted arrest, requiring backup officers. Keene didn't mention the slap. He didn't mention the bystanders. He didn't mention the missing footage. Because prosecutors didn't present the full truth, they presented the strongest story that survived the rules." Rebecca Sloan stood. "Your Honor," she said evenly, "the state's narrative relies entirely on one document, Officer Mercer's report, and that report is contradicted by independent civilian footage." Keene's eyes flicked slightly. Sloan continued, "We have already submitted the initial video into discovery. It clearly shows Officer Mercer striking Captain Hill without provocation." Mercer's jaw tightened in the background. Keene stepped forward. "The state objects to characterization. That video is incomplete and does not show the moments leading up to the assault." Sloan's voice didn't change. "That's correct. It's incomplete because the police department has failed to produce functioning body camera or dash camera footage." Judge Whitfield looked up. "Mr. Keene, where is the footage?" Keene straightened. "The department reported technical failure, Your Honor. The files were corrupted." Whitfield's eyes narrowed slightly. "Both files?" "Yes." Whitfield paused. "Do you have maintenance logs? Upload logs? Metadata?" Keene hesitated, just enough to be noticed. "Not at this time." Sloan spoke immediately. "And that is exactly why we filed our motion to compel. The state cannot rely on the absence of evidence as a shield while simultaneously demanding the court treat Officer Mercer's version as fact." Keene's face tightened. "Your Honor, Officer Mercer is a sworn law enforcement officer." Sloan turned her head slightly, looking directly at Keene. "And Captain Hill is a sworn military officer with no criminal record, multiple deployments, and a spotless service history." The courtroom fell quiet. Judge Whitfield looked at Marcus. "Captain Hill, Have you had any disciplinary issues in the military? Marcus stood when addressed. No, Your Honor. Whitfield nodded once. Then she looked back at Keene. Mr. Keene, I'm going to be direct. The court is troubled by missing video evidence in a case of this seriousness. Keene forced a controlled smile. Understood, Your Honor. Whitfield turned to Sloane. Miss Sloane, what are you requesting? Sloane didn't waste words. Dismissal for lack of credible evidence, or, at minimum, an order compelling full production of equipment logs, dispatch audio, and surrounding surveillance footage. Keene objected immediately. That's an overreach. The state has probable cause. Sloane's tone sharpened slightly. Probable cause is not a magic spell. It does not erase facts. Whitfield held up her hand. Enough. She looked down at her notes, then back up. I am not dismissing the case today. However, I am granting the defense motion to compel. The state will provide all body cam and dash cam diagnostic records, upload logs, and dispatch audio within 14 days. Keene's jaw clenched. Mercer shifted in his seat. Whitfield continued, and I will say this on the record. If it becomes clear that evidence was intentionally withheld or destroyed, this court will not hesitate to impose sanctions. Her gaze flicked toward Mercer. Do you understand, officer? Mercer nodded stiffly. Yes, Your Honor. Sloane sat down slowly. Marcus leaned slightly toward her. That's not dismissal, he whispered. Sloane's voice stayed low. It's leverage. Marcus stared ahead. Outside the courthouse, Mercer walked out still in uniform, still protected by the system. But for the first time since the traffic stop, something had changed. The judge wasn't fully convinced anymore, and once doubt entered the courtroom, it never left quietly. The courtroom was fuller this time, not packed but attentive. Word had spread. A military officer, an assault charge, missing body cam footage, civilian video circulating quietly online. People were curious, and curiosity changed energy. Marcus sat at the defense table beside Rebecca Sloane, dressed in a clean navy suit. No uniform, no medals, just composure. Across the aisle, Officer Daniel Mercer entered in full dress blues, polished badge, ribbon bar aligned perfectly, hair cut tight. The visual contrast was intentional. Juries trusted uniforms. Judge Eleanor Whitfield called the room to order. Jury selection had already concluded the day before. 12 citizens now sat in the box: teachers, a mechanic, a nurse, a retired accountant. Ordinary people asked to decide credibility. ADA Thomas Keene stood first for opening statements. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice steady and confident, this case is about public safety. Officer Daniel Mercer performed a routine traffic stop. The defendant, Captain Marcus Hill, responded with hostility and physical aggression. Keene paced slowly. Officer Mercer feared for his weapon. He acted to protect himself and the public. He paused, letting it land. Law enforcement officers make split-second decisions every day. We cannot second-guess those decisions simply because the outcome is uncomfortable. He returned to his table. Rebecca Sloane rose next. She didn't pace. She didn't gesture dramatically. This case, she said calmly, is not about split-second decisions. She looked directly at the jury. It is about accountability. She walked 2 steps forward. You will see video evidence showing Officer Mercer striking Captain Hill without provocation. Keene shifted slightly in his seat. You will hear claims that critical footage malfunctioned at the exact moment force was used. She paused deliberately. And you will be asked to decide whether credibility comes from a uniform or from facts. She returned to her seat. The state called Officer Mercer as its first witness. Mercer took the stand confidently. He swore the oath without hesitation. Keene approached him. Officer Mercer, describe what happened the night of April 14th. Mercer spoke clearly. I initiated a traffic stop due to a cracked taillight and erratic driving. The defendant became defensive immediately. Marcus's expression didn't change. He exited the vehicle but refused clear commands. He moved his hand toward my duty belt. I perceived a threat. Keene nodded. And what did you do? I applied controlled force to neutralize the threat and placed him under arrest. Did you strike him without cause? No. Mercer didn't blink. Sloane took notes quietly. Keene concluded his direct examination. Officer Mercer, did you act in good faith? Yes. No hesitation. The jurors watched carefully. Some nodded subtly. Uniform, confidence, clean answers. Sloane stood for cross-examination. She approached the witness stand slowly. Officer Mercer, she began, voice calm. You testified that Captain Hill moved toward your weapon. Yes. And you feared for your life? Yes. You've been on the force how long? 4 years. And in that time, how many suspects have attempted to disarm you? Keene objected. Relevance. Sloane responded smoothly. Establishing credibility and experience, Your Honor. Whitfield nodded. Answer. Mercer hesitated. None. Sloane paused, letting silence sit. So, this would have been the first? Yes. She nodded once. And yet there is no body camera footage of this alleged attempt? Equipment malfunctioned. Both cameras malfunctioned? Yes. The room felt tighter. Sloane didn't push further. Not yet. Nothing further at this time, she said. Marcus glanced at her. You're stopping, he whispered quietly once she sat. She didn't look at him. Not today, she replied. Across the courtroom, Mercer felt steady again. The jury hadn't seen anything explosive. The slap video hadn't been introduced yet. As far as the public record went, it was still his word against Marcus's, and right now, his word still carried the badge. By the second day of trial, the jury had started leaning. Not openly, not verbally, but Marcus could see it in the small things, the way one juror stopped making eye contact with him, the way another nodded slightly when Officer Mercer described threat perception. Rebecca Sloane noticed it too. That was why she waited. She didn't rush evidence in court the way amateurs did. She let the state build a tower of certainty first. Then she planned to remove the foundation. Officer Daniel Mercer returned to the stand for redirect. ADA Keene gave him space to reinforce his image. Officer Mercer, Keene said, why do you do this job? Mercer's voice softened, rehearsed but convincing. To protect people. To keep the streets safe. And did you believe Captain Hill was a threat? Yes. Keene nodded solemnly. No further questions. Mercer looked toward the jury with the calm confidence of a man who believed the system would always catch him before he fell. Judge Whitfield turned. Cross-examination, miss. Sloane. Sloane stood. This time, she carried a single folder in her hand. No thick stack, no dramatics, just one folder. She walked to the center of the courtroom and stopped. Officer Mercer, she said, yesterday you testified under oath that Captain Hill was aggressive, belligerent, and that you never struck him without provocation. Mercer's jaw tightened slightly. Yes. Sloane nodded. And you testified that the only reason force was used was because you believed he was reaching for your weapon. Yes. Sloane took a breath. Then she turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defense moves to introduce Defense Exhibit C into evidence. Keene stood instantly. Objection. We have not had sufficient time. Judge Whitfield cut him off. Mr. Keene, you were provided the exhibit yesterday at 5:12 p.m. That is sufficient time. Overruled. A low murmur moved through the gallery. Sloane walked to the court clerk and handed over a USB drive. The courtroom screen flickered. Then the video appeared. A timestamp. A streetlight glow. The side of Marcus's sedan. Mercer's posture changed immediately. He sat straighter, his eyes locked on the screen like he already knew what was coming. The footage began. The jury watched. They saw Marcus step out calmly, hands visible, movements slow. They saw Mercer stand too close, too tense. Then the audio played. Mercer's voice came through clearly. You don't look like you just got off base. Marcus's voice was calm. I'm going home, officer. Mercer's tone sharpened. You people always got something to say. A juror in the front row blinked hard. Then it happened. The slap, sharp, loud, undeniable. The courtroom flinched as one. The video continued. Marcus didn't swing back. He didn't lunge. He didn't even raise his hands. Mercer shoved him. Then the camera angle shifted slightly and caught Mercer's mouth moving again. Even without perfect audio, the words were readable. Let's see how tough you are in court. Sloane paused the video at the exact moment Mercer's hand was on Marcus's shoulder, forcing him down. She turned to the witness stand. "Officer Mercer," she said, voice controlled. "Is that you?" Mercer swallowed. "Yes." "And is that Captain Hill resisting?" Mercer's eyes darted toward Keene. Keene didn't move. Mercer looked back at Sloane. "No." Sloane stepped closer. "So, when you testified yesterday that you never struck him, that was false." Mercer's voice cracked slightly. I was responding to a threat." Sloane didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She just let the jury see the truth. And the truth did what it always did in a courtroom. It made liars look small. Outside the courthouse, the same video was already spreading online. Not leaked. Not rumored. Officially entered into evidence. Public record. And now the entire city could watch the moment Officer Daniel Mercer lost control and tried to bury it under a badge. The courtroom didn't explode into shouting. There was no dramatic screaming match. No Hollywood chaos. What happened after the video played was worse for Officer Daniel Mercer. It was silence. The kind of silence that only comes when a room full of strangers realizes they've been lied to. Judge Eleanor Whitfield stared at the screen for a long moment after Sloane paused the footage. Her expression didn't change, but the air around her did. Then she looked at Mercer. "Officer," she said coldly, "you testified under oath that you did not strike the defendant without provocation." Mercer swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor. And the video shows you striking him." Mercer shifted in the witness chair. "I perceived a threat." Judge Whitfield held up her hand. "That was not my question." Mercer's mouth opened, then closed. Ada Keene stood quickly. "Your Honor, the state requests a recess." "No," Whitfield said sharply. "You will sit down." Keene froze. The jury watched everything. Whitfield leaned forward slightly. "Officer Mercer," she continued, "you also testified that Captain Hill reached toward your duty belt. This video does not show that." Mercer's voice lowered. "The angle." "Stop," Whitfield snapped. "Just stop." She turned toward the clerk. "Mark Exhibit C as admitted." Then she looked back at Keene. "Mr. Keene, does the state have any evidence beyond Officer Mercer's report and testimony to support the assault charge?" Keene's face tightened. He knew the answer. "No, Your Honor." Whitfield nodded once. "Then this case is over." The words hit the courtroom like a hammer. Marcus didn't react outwardly. He didn't smile. He didn't exhale in relief. He simply sat still, hands folded, eyes forward. Because part of him still didn't believe it was real. Keene stood again, carefully this time. "Your Honor, the state moves to dismiss all charges without prejudice." Rebecca Sloane rose immediately. "No," she said. Keene blinked. Sloane's voice stayed firm. "With prejudice. The state has wasted months of Captain Hill's life, damaged his career, and attempted to secure a conviction based on false testimony." Judge Whitfield looked at Keene like she was measuring his spine. Then she nodded, dismissed with prejudice. A quiet ripple moved through the courtroom. Not cheers, just a collective understanding. The truth had won, and it hadn't even required a jury verdict. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed toward the steps as Marcus and Sloane exited. "Captain Hill," someone shouted. "Do you feel vindicated?" Marcus stopped. For the first time since the arrest, he spoke publicly. "I feel tired," he said calmly, "and I feel disappointed." The cameras zoomed in, not just in Officer Mercer, Marcus continued, but in a system that assumed I was guilty before it ever asked for proof. Sloane stepped forward. "And we will be filing a civil rights lawsuit," she added, "immediately." Inside the courthouse, Judge Whitfield had not finished. She called the bailiff over and spoke quietly. Within an hour, internal affairs investigators arrived at the precinct. Lieutenant Carlin Wynne watched Mercer from her office window as he was escorted into a conference room, not for a friendly debrief, but for a formal interview. The union rep arrived late, sweating. Mercer sat stiffly, eyes wide now. "Because the badge didn't protect you once the lie went public. 2 days later, the Army held a short press conference. Colonel Reynolds stood beside Marcus Hill and spoke clearly. Captain Hill has served honorably. The Army stands by him. And when Mercer turned on the news that night, he saw his own face on screen, not as a hero, as the officer who slapped a black military captain, then tried to destroy him with a fake case. Mercer had controlled the narrative first. But once the truth entered the record, the public took control back. And this time, it wasn't going away.